Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge. I'm Patty Roberts at St. Mary's University School of Law. Today I'm excited to have a friend and fellow dean with me as a guest, and we are talking with Richard Moberly. He is the Dean of the College of Law at Nebraska, a position he's held since April 2017. Welcome, Dean Moberly.
Thanks. Great to be here, Patty.
Well, I'm excited to have you because you are such a long-term dean. When we look at things, we recently read that the median for dean service is 2.1 years, which is incredible. And you have now done 5 times that.
I'm close.
So,
And if you count my interim year, which I do, because I was doing the job, it's been since 2016. So,
wow,
um,
incredible. So
yeah.
let's talk about what got you in this role to begin with. You went to Nebraska after you were practicing at McKenna Long and Aldrich in Atlanta. So you went into the academy at Nebraska, and how'd you get here?
Sure. Well, yeah, I was practicing employment law. I did that for 5 years before going to the academy. Was really excited to be at a place like Nebraska. I grew up in a college town. Grew up sort of as a faculty brat in Gainesville, Florida. My dad was a professor at the University of Florida, so I was excited to bring my family to a place where the university is a big part of the life, and Lincoln is certainly that. And I loved being a professor. I love being a professor, the teaching, but I also love the scholarship. And I never imagined that when you look at the dean job from the outside, at least I looked at it from the outside thinking, that looks like a terrible job. Why would anybody want to give up being a law professor to be a dean?
And I hope your opinion has changed, but
It
it might
has.
not
Well, I'm
have.
here, right? I've somehow either I'm really dumb or I'm a survivor. I don't know. But I became associate dean for faculty, which did nothing to make me think that being a dean would be great. If anything, I was an associate dean for 4.5 years and had told the dean, I'm ready to go back to faculty. I want to write a book. I have some things I want to do. I miss teaching. And then she left in the middle of the year and they asked me to be interim dean. And I remember saying to the chancellor, I'll do this, but I'm not going to be the dean because that's a terrible job. And then I did it for about 2 months as interim dean and decided I'm not just going to keep things that I'm not just going to like hold court, hold serve. I'm going to try and pretend as if I'm the dean. And so I really jumped into the role. And then I found out there's actually so many great things about being a dean. In fact, for all you associate deans out there, being a dean is way better than being an associate dean.
Oh my gosh, I say that all the time because I
Yeah,
was a vice dean for 4 years, and I think it's like the hardest job in legal education.
right.
Being a dean has so many more pluses.
Right. Well, I just have enjoyed it tremendously. I mean, and for me, it's much more of a team environment. You know, when you're a law professor, it's a lot of solo work, which I liked and I liked the work, but I really thrive in more of a team environment. And then the people you meet. I mean, I get to meet tremendous people, both deans at other law schools, but also our alumni. Our alumni are tremendous, and the people you meet when you're dean have been enormously successful. And so I get to just ask questions about what made them successful, and I've learned a ton.
That's awesome. Well, thank goodness you changed your mind and decided to stay because 10 and a half years, if you add your interim time, is really significant. Like you can make a huge difference. I applaud you for jumping in, even as interim, wanting to make a difference. So here you are, and you are the 17th dean at Nebraska. What is it you're most proud of at this particular moment in the trajectory of the law school?
It's a great question, and because I've been at the law school for 21 years, I sort of have a even longer view than just my deanship. I guess there are probably several things. When I started in February of 2016, that was right at the low point of in the time period, if you remember that, when students weren't really going to law school. So our incoming class was 105 that year, I think. Now we've had 5 straight classes of 150. So I feel like one of the things we've done is really grow the law school to the place where it should be. It's the largest population we've had here in a generation. We had more applications last year than we've had in our history. We were up about 50% in applications. So I feel like we've built a place where people want to come, and we did that by focusing on our community. We really, engaged our faculty and our staff to build a type of place that was really welcoming. It's hard to measure that necessarily, but that kind of community is incredibly important to me. I meet with every new employee and I tell them why I'm still here is because I love this place. I love the people people I work with. I love the work I get to do, and we treat each other well. And I think having a community that embodies treating each other well is just tremendous. And I think people see it when they visit.
I'm sure they feel it too. I mean, that's really wonderful that you've been able to maintain that sense of community and even grow not only the amount of people in it, but that sense across everyone new who joins you. You and I have had occasion to talk about strategic planning. And, now that you're coming up on 10 years in the role as official dean, I know that you're wrapping up a very successful strategic plan. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that process and why it's important and what it's done for Nebraska.
All right. Thanks for that question. And you know how strongly I feel about strategic planning. And I always like to recognize that most people don't. Most people hate strategic planning, right? And it's because it's often a process that one person writes and you put it on a shelf and you never actually look at it again. And I wanted to take our community through that early in my deanship. I sort of buy into that Abe Lincoln, like if you have 6 hours to chop a tree, I'd spend 4 hours sharpening the axe sort of quote. Like, I don't understand how we can get anywhere if we don't have a plan. And, it's not a death pact, that plan. Things will change and you have to be able to adapt, but it can bring direction to how a group is thinking. So in 2019, we engaged in a pretty long, intensive process over 6 months where we brought 55 stakeholders, faculty, students, staff, alumni, even people in the community together. And we kind of did an in-depth look at who we thought we were and who we wanted to be and tried to focus on that delta. And so we created a plan that in 2019 that I often call both accurate and aspirational. It was accurate of who we were, but it was really aspirational of who we wanted to be. And we just are wrapping that up. I'm getting ready to produce a final report. And, I think it's helped give us really a lot of focus. And it starts with our mission statement. We wrote a very simple mission statement, and that we develop inclusive leaders who advance justice, solve problems, and serve with integrity. And that has been sort of our North Star on almost everything we've done. And even having that so prominent, it's in our building, it's in all our materials. The students joke that I can't give a speech without saying that mission. And they're probably right, because it helps us frame everything that we want to do. It's helped us make a bunch of really great decisions about where we wanted to go. And it also helped us think about what we weren't doing, or at least be more definite. So it made us say, like, yeah, we advance justice. And then we'd say, well, how exactly do we do that? Like, where in our curriculum are we talking about justice? And we add courses on, poverty law. We brought in the executive director of one of our great nonprofits here to teach a poverty law course. But we also thought about public service. And so we have 2 former state attorney generals come in and teach a course on the role of the attorney general. And we have sort of decided we want to be the #1 place in America for people interested in public service and public interest work. And, everyone will have a different definition of justice, but we all ought to be working towards bettering the world with that idea of justice in mind. And so it helped kind of refine our thinking of where we wanted to invest.
Whenever I hear you talk about strategic planning, you just make me want to dust mine off and start over. I mean, you make it sound really exciting. And I love how you say accurate and aspirational. It's not easy to do, but it is certainly valuable when you can do it, especially with a variety of stakeholders. I love your mission statement, and thank you for sharing that with us. Out of that has come some recognition of how justice is harder to get in rural areas. And so Nebraska, obviously, tremendous amount of rural areas. We here in Texas also have a lot of rural spaces. So this is a topic of interest to lots of us across the country. Tell me how Nebraska is approaching that, how the College of Law thinks they can move the needle.
It's a great question. It really is a top priority for us in Nebraska. And I know it's a top priority for people across the country. Just to give some context, in Nebraska, there's 93 counties. 12 of them have no attorneys. And another 18 or so, some depending on the count, 20, have 3 attorneys or less, most of whom are 65 or older. So there is a current and a coming crisis of people just being able to access basic legal services from, with juvenile law or in the landlord-tenant context. And so how can we help at the law school address that problem throughout the state? So we've done a number of things that I think are pretty interesting, but they're long-term issues. And we're also fighting against some societal movements of people moving from rural areas to urban areas. And there's some things we can address, but one of the things we did very early on in my deanship was create something called the Rural Law Opportunities Program, which actually, as an aside, my staff gives me a hard time because I can't really say the word rural very well. And one of the very first things I did was create a program where that was in the title of it. And so,
Okay, that cracks me up
I
because when
mean,
I
I'm
heard
from
you say it,
Florida.
I was
I'm from
like,
Florida.
that's very interesting.
Yeah,
But I
I'm
wasn't
from
going to say
Florida. I
it.
say rule, and they're like rule, like RULE. I'm
Rule of
like, no,
law.
rule, like RURAL. So for all you listeners out there, I apologize, but when you hear me say rule, what I'm really saying is rule. But anyway, so I have to say it all the time. So it's Rural Law Opportunities Program. We'll just call it RLOP so I can stop embarrassing myself. We created relationships with 3 state colleges throughout the state, and they agreed to provide 4-year scholarships for undergrads who are interested in law. And then we would automatically admit them to law school if they hit essentially our 25th percentiles in GPA and LSATs. And then throughout the 4 years that they were undergrads, we built a relationship with them. So we would go send people out to their colleges, we would bring them to the law school. And the idea is by the time they get to their senior year, they know us really well. They know what they can do with a law degree, and hopefully they'll come here. And then because and they have to be from a rural area, the idea is because they're from that area, they're more likely to go back. And we actually just blatantly stole this from our medical school, who had been doing this for about 20 years and has about a 60% return rate for students going back to rural areas to practice medicine. So this is a long-term project, right? I mean, they're not going to finish law school for 7 years after we start this, but
Yeah.
we're now starting to see the returns on that. We've had 11 students graduate from the program, and 7 of them have gone back to rural areas to practice. Now there's 22 of them in law school and 70 more on the undergrad level. So the pipeline is building now. And during the summers, try and help them find internships with lawyers in rural areas. So that connection, I think, could be really valuable going forward. But that's a long-term 7-year play.
You could
We've
make it
done
a
some other.
6-year play. If you do a 3+3, you could make it
Okay,
a
fair
6-year
enough,
play.
right? We could do that. Yep, right. 6 years. We have some 3+3 students in programs. We're
That's
doing,
exciting.
yeah, no, it's great. And, we have student programs here, student groups. We've partnered with our Nebraska State Bar Association to help provide, work with lawyers to get interviews for these students and coordinate rural interviews. So a lot of different places will come to campus and interview at once so our students can see lawyers from all over the state. We've changed our curriculum a little bit. We have a concentration in solo and small firm practice to kind of emphasize the areas that a small town lawyer will really need to be conversant in, from juvenile law to family law, trust and estates, those sorts of courses, and give them a concentration in that. And then we've also tried to change, or at least help, our lawyers who are currently in rural areas. In some areas we know are kind of underserved right now. For example, there aren't enough lawyers who can be a guardian ad litem for children, and when those children are removed from homes because of allegations of abuse or neglect. There's an attorney representing the parents, there's an attorney representing the state, and the child has a GAL assigned to it. And judges in rural areas are having trouble finding people who are qualified. So we have a children's justice clinic here that has a really innovative curriculum on how to represent children. And the professor in charge of that, Michelle Paxton, got a grant to then start training attorneys in rural Nebraska. And she's trained attorneys now in, I think, like 80 of the counties, or who have practices in 80 of the counties, on how to represent children really well. And we think we're changing the way children are represented, and it'll serve as a model, kind of provide services in underserved areas.
That's a huge impact. And I love that your rate of return is so high. 60% is pretty impressive for a
Yeah,
program like that.
I think that's what, where we are. And, some of these students will, of course, in their undergrad years decide they don't want to be lawyers, which is, it's fine. It's good to know that before you go to law school. And then some will go to other law schools, but a few have gone to other law schools. But most of them have been coming here. And I think we're going to continue to send them back out. The thing that we often also do is we just give a presentation or a panel on it's really a good life to be a lawyer in a smaller town. There are all sorts of things you can do. You're kind of a center of the business. You're a leader in the community. I didn't do it, but I've talked to so many of our graduates who do it, and they love it. And so we're trying to also tell that story a little bit more.
Fantastic. Well, that's, I'm sure, making a big difference for Nebraska. And while it might be a longer play, I mean, every county that doesn't have an attorney that you can add one, I mean, that's 100% increase right there. So
Right.
really exciting, especially that guardian ad litem work too. So coming off of a 6-year strategic plan, part of your plan addresses justice, and these rural initiatives certainly do that. But what else, looking at what you've accomplished in the strategic plan, really makes you excited and makes Nebraska distinctive? And now that you've finished it, what will be aspirational for Nebraska moving forward?
Yeah, you told me this wasn't an hour and a half podcast, so I mean, I'll try
No,
and keep it under an hour and a half, right? I'll just give you some highlights.
you have to be concise,
All
as
right, all right.
terms are.
Difficulties, Patty, difficulties. Well, one of the things we've done is really look at our curriculum, obviously, and I think we've developed some really important experiential learning opportunities for our students. So we had more than doubled our clinical program. So we used to have 4, now we have 9 clinics that give students real world experience representing real clients. We hired a director of externships and have a really powerful externship program where students are not just in the field, they come back and meet with our director in a class every semester that runs kind of alongside all of these externships. So there's 30 of them all out in different professional settings who come back and talk about how to be a professional, how to kind of live in that world, and what sort of issues arise when you're in that sort of work environment. So I think that's really given our students some real practical experiential learning that I love. We've really focused on solving problems with our scholarship and our work. Part of that's through these clinics. We have an innocence clinic that is looking at wrongfully convicted people. We have a housing justice clinic that's representing tenants in Lancaster County and totally altering how landlord tenants law is being practiced here. Used to be just almost entirely evictions. Now there's just a lot more benefit for tenants when they have representation. We have a program that one of our professors started called the Rural Reconciliation Project. I don't know, they all pick the word rural so that when I talk about it, I struggle. But
I'm getting the sense that was intentional.
yeah, I think they're now coming after me with it, Patty. But this project's really just rethinking rural spaces and how the law interacts in to build or denigrate rural spaces in all sorts of different ways. It focuses, some of what we've done with this kind of focus on solving problems and our scholarship. It's helped me with fundraising. So I have a donor who made a grant so that our junior faculty could get scholarship awards and have 1-year professorships, and the really successful ones, as kind of an incentive and a retention play to keep our junior faculty. Yeah, as I said, we've kind of changed our community. Our community was about 8% people of color when I started as dean, and we're about 20% now. And I think we've always been a state where we're a Connerly Amendment state since 2008. We could never take race into account in any sort of benefit or decision. So have gone out and it's been really thoughtful about recruiting and building a community where people feel welcome. So I'm really proud of that, because I think I'm willing to say, and even in this day and age, having a really diverse law school population helps the educational environment and brings a lot of people together with a lot of different perspectives. And when I say diversity, I mean like across the board. I mean, our Federalist Society and our American Constitutional Society will co-sponsor events where they debate and they get people from different, and it's just, I love that. We have a bunch of religious identity groups that bring in speakers and talk about the role of religion in their lives. And I think that's tremendous. So, I mean, having people who can talk across differences, that's what lawyers do. And if we don't have an environment where people have different perspectives on things and we don't teach them how to disagree respectfully, we're kind of failing at our job. And I think we're building that sort of community.
Absolutely. It always saddens me to think that law schools might lose that, because we are the place that should be doing it more than anyone else. The whole idea of, you can fight in the courtroom and then afterwards go out for lunch kind of thing. But, well, that sounds really terrific. And what a significant increase in diversity. So good for you. But
Thanks.
despite having restrictions, right? It
Right,
can be
right.
done.
Well, I mean,
It can
I
be
think
done.
it's sort of we're building a place where people feel, I think, really welcome, and it's just people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and I love that.
So moving forward, where do your priorities lie now that you have accomplished all that you have in the strategic plan?
Right. Well, one of the interesting things about Nebraska is our faculty, when I took over as dean, was very senior. And I've had probably, I think it's about half of our faculty retire. A few have passed away since I've been dean. And so half of our faculty now is junior, and we're not here in 2019 to help us create that plan. So now that we've sort of wrapped up this 6-year, it was a 5-year plan, but because of COVID, we made it 6 years. We need to rethink and get a whole new set of voices in to describe who we are accurately and also be aspirational of who we want to be. So I'm
Ooh, you
taking
get to do another
we're
one,
getting to do
another
another one,
strategic
right?
plan. Yeah.
Right. I'm probably the only one celebrating, but yeah, I mean, we're going to take it a little bit more slowly this time. And we're spending this whole year, our faculty is doing a self-study. So last year, my administrative team gathered tons of data and we did lots of surveys over the years and all the raw data that we collect as a law school. And we're giving this to this faculty committee. And the hope is that they'll take a really in-depth look as a self-study of, what are we doing well? What could we improve upon? And then a year from now, we'll do some strategic planning. And then, some of this is to set us up for an accreditation visit from the ABA in 27, 28. So really much of the next year and a half is kind of helping us look inward a little bit and then figure out what we want to do next with all of these new voices who have come into our community since we did the last one.
So who do you want to be now that you have different stakeholders, right? In some way.
Right. Yeah. I've been here 21 years. I'm sure there are a lot better ways to look at this place from some newer eyes than mine. So you stop seeing things when you've been in one place for that long. And so it's really important that these newer people who've experienced it differently than I did have a chance to. I mean, I tell them all the time, like, this is going to be your law school. So you need to start owning it now and deciding who you want to be.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've similarly had a lot of departures from retirements and health issues. And the great thing is you have faculty who stay for decades and decades and decades, but the not great thing is then you have a bunch to replace. But you're right, then you have the balance between those who've been there and those who have that fresh set of eyes. And some of the best things can come up then, but you can't
Right.
lose the culture. You don't want to lose the culture.
Right. Yeah.
So you'll be doing this new strategic plan and this self-study in anticipation of your site visit, all at a time when there is so much turbulence in higher education. And I told you before we began that the last question I always ask my guests is, what are your predictions for the future of legal education in the coming decade? How do you think it's going to evolve? And I will just say to our listeners that I thought maybe I need to revise that to say, how do you think it will evolve in the next 10 minutes? Because it seems like something is happening all the time.
Oh, right.
But let's leave it consistent and say, with your crystal ball, what do you think in the next decade with all the experience you have and what you see coming down the future? How will we change in the next decade?
I'll probably give an answer that I assume is common among your guests. I think artificial intelligence is going to have a transformative effect, but I won't just leave it at that. I'll try and be a little more specific, and maybe people think about this differently. I started in the academy. Half of my teaching load was in the civil clinic, so I'm a big believer in clinical experiences and that sort of experiential interaction with clients. But I'm very aware that one of the downsides of clinics is, if you student you kind of get whatever case comes to you in that sort of milieu for a semester. So you may have like 4 different cases and you meet those 4 different clients, and maybe one of them allows you to do a deposition or do a hearing, but it's random, right? And there's some good in that. But I think AI has the potential to help give our students more reps. And so, you think about there's this big push of getting students to be more quote unquote practice ready. And you and I had experiences where we know there's pushes from all over different stakeholders in legal education. And in some respects, in 3 years, you can only do so much, and we're taking students and moving them along in 3 years. But AI has the potential to, I think, actually speed up that process in some ways. You can interact with 20 different types of clients with 20 different types of problems, both in a client interview and in thinking about their problems. It can just create iterations of that will potentially speed up our students so that, they're not going to leave as a first year associate, but they may be able to do the work of a second or even a third year if we embrace it in that way. There's also a real risk because I think some of the foundational learning that we do in legal education can't be outsourced. You've got to know how to read a case. You've got to know how to distinguish facts. And the danger of AI is it's so easy to get it to summarize a case for you and get it to kind of do the work. But that work has these foundational benefits in how we really learn and think like a lawyer. And so doing both of those at once is both the kind of the opportunity and the challenge I think we face.
I agree, because we have to make sure our students can do both. which
Yeah.
means we need to learn how to do both, right? So we
Right.
can teach it.
Absolutely. And allow faculty to figure out how to bring it into the classroom. And they'll do it in a ton of different ways. I mean, we're already seeing on our faculty people using AI in all sorts of kind of interesting ways in the classroom, and then some not. And as a dean, you can't really control this to any great degree because our faculty have academic freedom and can do it the way they think best. But we're trying to do a lot of learning and showing here are some things you could think about. And we're seeing people really adopt it at a high rate.
That's terrific. Well, thank you so much, Dean Moberly. I think the final thing I'd like you to leave us with is please share with us either your favorite karaoke song or your walk-on music when you're teaching.
Wow, I love karaoke.
I
I
do
do.
now too because of you and
Oh,
others.
well, that's right. You're very good at it. I like the song Brandy. It wouldn't, that's sort of one that I can karaoke. I have a very limited range, so I have limited songs. Most of my karaoke songs are sort of speak singing because I can't really carry a tune. I also like my walk-up song would probably be AC/DC, You Shook Me All Night Long. It's the very first karaoke song I did, and it's a surprise one. People don't expect me to kind of come out and rock AC/DC. So.
No, I was surprised. So if you haven't yet seen Dean Moberly rock out to AC/DC, you should try to put that on your bucket list. Thank you so much for being a guest. Good luck as you start the year, and we will look with great interest to see all that Nebraska continues to accomplish at their College of Law. If you enjoyed this conversation, I hope you'll listen to additional thought leaders that you can find on the Aspen Leading Edge podcast on your favorite podcast channel. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.